I'll just remind everyone about the colleagues that we have in the room also, just in case you're not able to ask your question tonight, you can approach any of us here. So.
Yeah, my question will be directed towards perhaps the structural engineer of your group here. How safe are the multi-story buildings in Makati in case something happens in Makati, especially keeping view the earthquake?
Yeah. So, the few that I've read about Philvox, about the assessments by UP professors and by Palafox, they have a lot more confidence with the high-rise buildings built in the last 15 years because they were built at a much, much higher standard compared to buildings in the last 60 years from 1950s. I think back then the code was you only build for level 6 earthquakes, level 6.5, and now they've raised that bar to 7 or something like that. So I'm not too sure about those numbers, but definitely in the last 15 years, 20 years, there was a shift in the standards. And I think with this new development, you're going to see another shift of higher standard quality buildings.
Thank you, sir, for that question. Any other questions from the floor? Yeah, please come on the mic, sir.
Yes, good evening. How about if the earthquake goes up and down instead of going sideways?
Only God knows. That's the answer.
Any other questions from the floor? If there, yes, please. First mic.
Hello. You mentioned like rentals might soften. By what rate, or like what's your projection? Why will it soften and at what rate?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that there's some fluke markets like Santa Mesa. Santa Mesa, there's a very small project there. It's only 2,000 units of SM, and I'm being sarcastic. So it's actually a very big building. It's 4 towers. It's 2,000. It's on 2 hectares of land. It's the largest building you will see in the entire Manila, Santa Mesa area. Okay, and despite the number of units there, they are renting for very close to the rates in Makati. I'm talking about the Salcedo Village, Mega World projects, the mid-level markets. The 1-bedroom units there are very close to the rates here in Makati. And I'm shocked. And then I went around and said, how the hell is this possible? And then I realized that there's so many foreign students studying in the university belt, and the only safe place they can find is that. They, of course, have the option to live in another, boarding house, 2,000 pesos a month cheaper, but it's just not worth it. They're in an enclosed environment. They have Wi-Fi 24/7. They've got coffee shops and sagugulaman downstairs and supermarkets downstairs, and they have this massive walking area, 3 lap pools, you name it. The whole Santa Mesa, Manila can flood for weeks, and they'll be fine in that condo. So that's one. Second, we're told that some of the fastest selling condos are in the Bay Area. So I think Makati and Bonifacio, the higher end market, experienced some kind of softening of, I think roughly 10% would be fair, 8%, but that was for a very short span of time, and I think that's adjusting back up. Yeah, rents are, I think, back up on the rise. So it's all a question of when do these condos actually get finished, right? You look at, the other question I always get asked is, if so many buyers are there, why are half the lights out at night, right? I can tell you that we have sold and managed 500 apartments in Taft Avenue, bought by 500 individual Singaporeans. Okay, absentee owners. who say, wow, Philippines, I read about it, interesting, okay, let's take a punt, you know. Do I buy a closet or shoe cabinet in Singapore? Do I buy a nice prime property in Philippines? It's a very easy choice. Do I get a yield of 1% or do I get a yield of 6%? Even if you factor the currency risk, it's going to be okay. So they do it. 500 apartments, 500 individual Singaporeans, all leasing to locals, all local students. So there are pockets of fluke markets that we all thought, no way can the market sustain that much volume, and we've been proven wrong. So I think as soon as there's a big chunk of space coming to the market, like I think Jazz, this other not so small project in Nicanor Garcia, Jupiter, with it's only going to be in total 5,000 units only, I think. And that's phase one. I'm just kidding. So, and again, before, how long that property was in the market for? 4 to 5 years. Why? Height limit. Why? Cemetery. Nobody wants to live there. And now, it's fully sold. And would that market produce a drop in rents? Most likely, because you injected 5,000 units all in one go. Or 3,000 units all in one go. But that, I think, will be temporary and all the space will be eaten up. Why? The same experience in Santa Mesa. How many, dorms are out there in Makati, in the fringes, in Yakal, in Barrio Binay, or whatever. Barrio Onsay, Barrio Balat, thank you. Those places. The village of Rockwell, and dami dyan. And they're all going to migrate out of those houses into condos. Some of my colleagues who I know live very far, I'm telling them, you're 3 hours in the car. You can translate that to money if you can make the investment to rent a cheap apartment in Makati or Ortigas.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the floor? Yep.
Among all the projects you mentioned, you did not talk about the Century Properties, which is a huge complex being built in Kalayan, where the international school was.
Yeah.
Do you look at it as profitable to invest?
I think if you look at the stock of, if you look at how the financials of Century Properties are doing, I think they're doing quite fine. Number two, a lot of the foreign, there's a lot of aspirational foreigners in Singapore, Hong Kong, Thailand, Vietnam, who are saying, I can't afford luxury property in my own country, so I will go and pick up a branded apartment in the Philippines. Because on paper, it makes great sense. The fact that they were able to do that project and do so many things with that small plot of land, I think it's amazing. It's really amazing. So I think they're doing pretty okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Yeah, please come to the mic.
Right now, it takes us about 30 minutes from C5 to McKinley. What would be the scenario of Fort Bonifacio 4 years from now?
Okay, thank you. I'm glad you asked that question. So what I always tell people is that Bonifacio is not the silver bullet for all the country's problems. So it's like, oh, I'm in Bonifacio. That means I'm immune to traffic. I'm immune to hold-up. I'm immune to petty crime. I'm immune to getting run over, even though, because I have rights as a pedestrian, which I don't have anywhere else outside Ayala, Alabang, and Bonifacio. Well, you'll get run over in Bonifacio just as well as anywhere. It's just that people do have a bit more driving sense in Bonifacio. And indeed, the crime is much lower in Bonifacio than anywhere else. And indeed, the traffic is still less than anywhere else in the city. Is it going to get worse? Well, definitely, because the population in Bonifacio is going to ramp up very quickly. But I think you're going to find that as more and more buildings are going to get put up there, less and less people will use cars once they're in, and they will walk. There are certain habits that people in this country have to change. For example, this is the only country probably in the world where you will run 42 kilometers in 2 hours, 2.5 hours, 3 hours, but they will refuse to walk 500 meters, 200 meters, 100 meters. Kasi naka-high heels, it's too hot, it's too wet, malubak, whatever. So, those are habits that have to change. So, Jazz, right? Oh, Jazz Residences is going to flood traffic in Nicanor, Jupiter, etc. Well, okay, the reality is that they're not selling as many parking slots as usual in condos. Number two, people will have to realize that, oh, I live in, I don't know, let's say Bulacan. Oh, Friday night I go home, Sunday evening, there's no traffic, I go back to Makati. And then from Jazz to Tordesillas Street is only 800 meters. What? It's only 800 meters? Ang layo. Well, if you're in Mega Mall, right, you'd be walking up and down Mega Mall, which is roughly 800 meters, like so many times every day, but people won't do it. So I think those habits really have to change. In Hong Kong, for example, they will give you more FAR to build on your property, meaning more buildable space if the less cars you have. Right? But we love our cars. Right? We won't let them go. We will die in them. We will be happy to sit in the car for 3 hours than walk. I will hold my bladder for 2 more hours than go down to the nearest gas station and walk. It doesn't make sense to me, really.
One more question. What changes do you expect when Makati takes over Taguig? Port Bonifacio.
First of all, it will be called the Binay Global City.
What else?
I don't know. Because I don't want to make any political statements.
These are realistic predictions.
Okay, I will give you second-hand and third-hand information. So first of all, not from me. These are not my views. I'm being like a lawyer now. I'm putting a lot of disclaimers. So a lot of people are concerned about the difference in taxes because they are definitely lower in Bonifacio, Taguig, than Makati. Number two, they're concerned about how many Jolly Jeeps will then erupt in the beautiful paved pebblestone sidewalks of Bonifacio, which right now litter Salcedo Village and Legazpi Village. So, third is maybe enforcement, because then, I think there's a perception that Taguig kind of gets better enforcement than Makati. Perception. Again, not my...
Taguig traffic enforcers are friendly. Makati is the opposite. Basically.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is there any?
Yes. Quite a few actually. Oh, sorry. Going back to the point of Mr. Chatlani about what happens to BGC when it becomes Makati. Do the rules prescribed by the Ayalas and FBDC still hold ground, or does everything change? Because we all know that it's because of the private sector planning and design. That's what makes BGC, not the Taguig City government.
Yeah, I think Bonifacio was bidded out and awarded by the government with a certain number of square meters you can build in the entire city. So I think it takes more than just a city ordinance to change that. I think and the other thing is that Bonifacio is 45% owned by the national government, by BCDA, what they call the Basis Conversion Development Authority. So for so as they're independent from the local government, and I think you're going to see a bit more credibility in the way things are enforced in Bonifacio. Because we don't want what happened in Makati to happen to Bonifacio, which is what? The city of Makati was built for FAR 8. And in the 90s, with the boom and nowhere else to build, the city was forced to, partly forced to, partly encouraged, depending who you ask, to go from FAR 8
I don't want to make a political or partisan statement, but it seems to be it's only Ayala who understands this at the moment. And moving forward, do you see anybody else with the same train of thought?
Before I ask that, may I ask President Marpuri to issue out more margaritas to everyone in this room? Maybe we can have a more candid conversation. But no, seriously, we do so much work with local governments for free. I host a local government body in this room, in this room or in the room across, every month. Will they, and then on top of that, I go travel to all these places and say, look, you want the BPOs here in your city? This is what you need to do. I don't know how many of them actually do it. Actually, very few of them ever listen and do anything about it. That's the sad thing. Now, I think if we go down that path, then the real question is, when is the Philippines going to get its act together? Well, that's a whole different discussion.
Fair enough. Is there any additional information you can give us on a pressing concern, which is flood control?
Yeah.
What are the cities that are going to be badly affected? Of course, we know Makati has zero elevation above sea level. People in Ortigas and Pasig, Capital Commons area, Valle Verde seem to be safer. Fort is about 120 at max, 130 above sea level.
If I had it my way, we would all live in Antipolo, where the city lights are beautiful. There are trees, birds, snakes, wildlife. It's nice there. This just takes you forever to get to, and the Vietnam and the whole Southeast Asia can flood, but we'll be fine in Antipolo. But the reality is that there's no infrastructure. So, yes, I'm very concerned about the city because, according to Palafox, the Metro Manila is like a bathtub where you have like 7 or 12 or 18 faucets feeding into the bathtub, but there's only one drain, right? The other drain should have been somewhere in what they call the Alabang Viaduct, which is a misnomer because they call it the viaduct when there's no viaduct there. They should have built it. They could have built it. They missed building it. And so I was in Chicago, right? What does Chicago and Manila have in common? A guy named Burnham, architect Burnham, the master planner of Chicago. He was elected in 1902 or something like that, after the Great Fire of Chicago, whatever. They hired this guy, young guy, said, master plan the community. Awesome, did it. And the Americans took over, flattened the Japanese World War II flattened Metro Manila. Who do they call to rebuild and master plan the city? Burnham, which is why we have Burnham Park in Baguio, right? So he comes here and he's like, wow, this really looks like Chicago. You have open water, similar to Michigan Lake, and then you've got Dewey Boulevard, which is not Michigan Avenue, but another parallel to. So if you look at the grid, it's very, very similar, right? But the moment they hand it over to us, it kind of gets very fuzzy on the execution side. So again, drawings are very easy to do, and you can award people so many medals and stars about the best drawings you can have. The execution is where it's really, really lacking.
One more question.
Yes.
If we were to give you a check, 20 million pesos, what would you do with it right now?
20 million pesos, wow.
To buy a property.
I would rebuild Tacloban. Or one, yeah. We could do a lot with that in Tacloban. You mean in a real estate venture?
Yes.
In a real estate venture.
The answer is here.
Invest.
Yeah. Our RT would say invest in the Land products. I think you have to ask what the priorities are. Because here's the thing, okay? I think, number one, I'd invested in the villages.
Residential villages.
Residential enclosed villages. Okay, the gated communities. Even at 120,000, 150,000, 200,000 pesos per square, yes. Right? Why? One stat. Okay? So, How many people in Metro Manila? 10 million. How many users? 14 million. How many villages, gated villages? How many households in the gated, how many individual properties in the gated villages? 45,000. From Ayala Heights, up north, all the way down to Southville, Ayala Southville. So, excluding New Valley, etc. Southville. 45 individual properties from north to south. Okay? How much of that is BF Homes? 20,000. So, exclude BF Homes from the equation. How many you have left? 25,000. How many people who have rights to those properties are there in Metro Manila? 25,000 households times, let's say, 7 people to a household, meaning 2 parents and 5 kids, assuming that there's still people like me doing that today, right? So 25 times 7 is 175,000 people living in these 25,000 units in a city of 10 million people. Now, what is 175,000 by 10 million? That's like 20% of 1%. So the scarcity value of these villages will keep rising. So Ayala keeps touting Alabang as the big thing back then. Why? Because in 1977, when they opened it, lots there were worth 170 pesos per square meter. Today, an average lot would cost 50,000 pesos per square meter. A golf course lot, 80,000 per square meter. And the perimeter lots, the not so likable lots like the perimeter lots and the main road lots, are trading at 40,000 per square meter. Right? Versus 170,000 40 years ago. Even if you factor inflation in, real cost of money, I think you'll still be way ahead with those numbers. And and I would invest that 20 million in a property in Alabang. Why? Because I think Alabang is the most heavily discounted asset in the city. Why? Because again, if you go to Alabang, the price there is 50,000 per square average lot versus 200,000 per square or 150,000 per square in Makati. Right? That's a 75% discount to Makati. Why is there a 75% discount when it only takes you 20 minutes to get there? And it is beautiful. But never mind, Ayala Alabang. Let's go to Pacific Malayan Village. 35 to 37,000 per square. Cheaper pa. It's like 20%, 80% discount. Why would you not buy it? You go to Alabang Hills. They're testing 37,000. Why would you not buy it? Hillsboro, Alabang 400. Why are people so obsessed with I don't know. Corinthian hitting 150. White Plains hitting 100.
Thank you, sir. I think there being no more questions, we'd like to thank Mr. David Leechiu again. Once again, round of applause.